So first, Gary,
Yes, sir.
we're honored to be here. Thank you for having us. We know you're super busy. Board meeting was great. But now we have you alone. So this is a rare opportunity. And we have a ton of folks in our audience who are in the operating positions of companies, both as practitioners and as leadership, who are very interested in what you have to say, given your background. So let's dig in.
Okay.
Very first thing, we want to know about Gary. Let's talk
Yes.
about you.
Okay.
So don't be embarrassed.
I'm a little embarrassed.
Background.
I don't like talking about myself.
Where you're from.
Okay.
Where'd you go to school? I want to hear about, the formative days of Gary Reiner.
Okay, so I grew up in Long Island, New York.
Yeah.
I grew up in a town called New Hyde Park.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Herrick's High School. And actually my last year in high school, I actually did not go to high school. I actually tried to wanted to see what it was going to be like. I grew up a tennis player. I wanted to see what it would be like to play tournaments all the time. And it was easily the least enjoyable year of my life. It was incredibly boring and lonely, and I decided to go to college. I went to Harvard College. I studied economics and math, and then I went to Harvard Business School, and I joined Boston Consulting Group. And it was a funny interview to get into BCG.
This is first
out of business school.
Right out of your MBA. Yeah,
exactly. And I had tried to grow a beard in business school. And I don't know whether you've ever tried to grow a beard or not, but my beard was horrible.
Can't.
Horrible.
It comes in patches.
Yes, it always looked like I hadn't shaved for 3 days. And so the day before the interview, I shaved. And I go to the interview, and I was obviously very nervous. And the guy had the worst beard I've ever seen in my life who interviewed me. And we spent 15 minutes with me telling him how I just shaved, I had the worst beard, and we got along so well that I got the job. That's how I got the job at BCG.
There are no accidents. Yeah.
Anyway, I loved it. I loved BCG to death. I mean, I was there for 10 years. Maybe the hardest thing professionally for me was leaving BCG. Headhunter had called and had asked whether I wanted to head up strategy at GE. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm quite happy with BCG. And he said, well, do you want to sit down with Jack Welch and talk about it? I said, sure, I'll sit down with Jack Welch and talk about it. So
this is interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So
you have to take that meeting.
You have to take the meeting.
Of course.
Yeah. And I was deadly scared in the meeting. We were interviewing, and he was interviewing me and asking me a bunch of questions. And at some point, and it's really kind of telling as to how he thought about his job and his need for picking a successor. This was 10 years before he was going to retire.
Interesting.
And halfway through, he said, do you want my job? I said, what? And he said, do you want my job? And I said, Jack, I'm just trying to get through this interview.
That's incredible.
And he actually laughed. And anyway, we hit it off, and I left BCG, as I said, and headed up strategy and M&A. And in the course of that,
This is a direct report to Jack.
Yeah. And about 2 years into it, I showed him. Went into his office very proudly with a graph that showed that our prices had been going down about 0.5% a year across all our businesses. But our costs were going up about 3% a year. And I drew the graph out. I extended it out a few more years and said, we're going to disappear as a company if we keep doing this, and we got to get our selling prices up. He said, no, we got to get our costs down. And so we need a big sourcing initiative to get all of our costs down, and you're going to lead it. So in addition to strategy and M&A, I headed up sourcing. Then 2 years later, I said, Jack, our IT's pretty bad around here. No one's really paying attention, and it's really going to become an important thing. He said, fine, you're CIO now. So
that was the transition.
That was the transition. I mean, I kept the other stuff, but that's how I became CIO.
That's interesting.
And then in 96, so 2 years later after that, I told them that there was a lot of feeling around the company that we cared more about product than more about earnings than we did about the quality of our products and the quality of our processes. And we discussed something called Six Sigma. Long story short, he said, "You're going to head up Six Sigma." So that's how And there's actually a lot of synergy between leading information technology and leading the quality initiative. There's a lot of good stuff that link between those two.
I can imagine, looking, and I lived that period. It was my entry into the workforce in 1993, and even that time, it was very hard to get a job. We were in sort of an economic drought, and I can imagine what GE would have been going through. Was the pricing suppression because of pressure external to you?
Yes.
So you were
being
competition. Correct.
Yeah.
So
okay.
the race to the bottom, so to speak.
Yeah, but it was not. It was 0.5% a year. I mean, it was not. It was not plunging. It was 0.5% a year, and that's just the world is globalizing, more competition. Still very profitable company. So 96 we launched quality, and then e-commerce started, and he said you should run that. So more and more, but it was more. There was nothing ever planned. It was more about I'd go to him and I'd say, "Someone needs to do this," and he said, "You do it."
You got it.
That's so it was always risky to tell him that.
Sounds good. Now go.
Right, exactly. Right. Make something happen. So that was it. And I was there for 20 years, 11 with Jack and 9 with Jeff Himmo. Left in 2010 and joined General Atlantic.
So pause.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an interesting. Pivot to the story, so to speak,
sure.
As I've sort of been digging in. There are lots of pathways into venture or private equity.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one, though, your transition. What was the draw? How did you come in? I actually had very specific questions. Like, let's talk about that transitional point.
Sure.
Who tapped you on the shoulder, and what was the interest? What was the
so exactly? It's a long story, but I'll keep it brief.
Yeah.
There was a spin out at GE called, which is now called JumpCloud. It was the business process outsourcing business within GE.
Interesting. Yeah.
And we decided as a company that we wanted to take it public and have that capability, which was captive at the time, begin to service third-party customers, not just GE.
Okay.
Prior to 2006, it was only serving GE.
Right. It would pivot its focus externally.
Correct. And we thought that it needed to go public to do that rather than be owned by GE.
Yeah.
Before it went public, we wanted to take some private money to kind of put a floor on the IPO. And we took it from General Atlantic. And the two very, very senior guys at GA joined the board from Genpact's point of view.
Interesting.
I joined the board from GE's point of view, and we got to know each other well. And as I was leaving GE, they said, "Why don't you come join us at GA?" And one of the first things I did at GA was join the board of Genpact from GA's point of view, rather than from GE's point of view.
Yes,
yeah.
They had their own strategy for you. As I often hear from my board or my venture friends. I'm looking to reduce my board seats.
Right, exactly. Right,
which is always interesting. Okay, so they're very smart.
Yes.
I can see how they operate.
Yeah.
What skills, your career post-Harvard, all the way through the Jack Welch years, into the spinoff, you developed a lot of skills. When you transitioned into venture, what did you take with you? Did you have a different lens than, and I mean this with no disparagement, but you have a lot of venture folks that never sat in your seat. They didn't operate. They can't appreciate the low-level, day-to-day dramas that occur in building and crafting a company. So I'm leading the witness here a bit, but what did you bring with you when you went over to the venture side?
Oh, it's a great question, and as I try to kind of take inventory of whatever I bring, in a way, I bring at least as much. I like to think I bring at least as much from BCG as I did from GE.
Yeah.
What you learn at a place like BCG and McKinsey, Bain, and others like it is how to think in frameworks and how to do pattern recognition. This looks like that, and there's a bunch of frameworks you learn in the world of consulting, and it's actually really good, and sometimes can get in the way of investing. And let me be clear about that. Try to be clear about that. What the frameworks that you learn at a place like BCG teach you is what's a good business and what's not. What's a great business, what's a good business, and what's a business that is going to be troubled. Mm-hmm. Which is really helpful when you're looking at companies. Okay, really around, is the market going to be there, and is the company going to have and sustain a competitive advantage? Those are the kinds of things you really go deep on. You have to in a place like BCG. If you can't, it just doesn't work. I mean, and you have to be able to do that relatively quickly and efficiently in a consulting firm. It's really good when you're exposed to a new company, that kind of perspective on the one hand. On the other hand, what makes for a great business does not always make for a great investment. There are times when you can invest and it can be a great outcome, but it wasn't a great business. And there are times when you can invest in a great business, but because of how you invested, when you invested, it won't be a great return. So those skills are really helpful, but they're not enough.
Yeah.
They're different. There's a different lens that you need to use in addition to the frameworks that you learn in a place like BCG.
So I see patterns,
Yeah.
I do, and
Sure.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
But is it a function? Is getting to your A game a function of time, or how do you shrink the amount of time to start pattern recognition? Like, did you see and formulate a lot of that pattern recognition at BCG early on?
You have to.
Yeah.
It's the only way to survive.
Is there any distinct thing? And again, in the spirit of leading the witness
Sure.
for me, I mean,
Sure.
I'm still on my journey, 25
We
years
all
in
are.
this career.
We all are
for
on
sure.
that journey. Yes.
And it's, my early days as a product R&D nerd. It was always about the product. Then I got, sort of career under my belt, and it became the model, like the business and the market.
Yeah.
And I learned patterns there. And now, by every definition, it's people. Like my greatest product is people. The pattern that I see is people. The greatest successes come by having amazing, passionate talent around you. And, I guess what I'm asking here is, where does that hold true
Sure.
in your pattern recognition?
It's incredibly important.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously important. It's why we were so excited about JumpCloud. It's not enough.
Yeah.
You need a compelling business model and a compelling business proposition. You need to have something, in addition to having great people. Let's think about technology companies. You need to have technology that adds value to a customer.
Right.
You need to have technology that is differentiated from the competition. And you need to have technology that stays differentiated from the competition. And you need to have a logic for why all three of those are true.
Interesting.
So it's great people, and people can help continue to differentiate technology, but you have to have a logic for why that is as well.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
This is a good theme to go down. Let's switch into more deeply about General Atlantic.
Sure.
It was a little orthogonal when, for us to even, when our sort of pairing came, JumpCloud and GA, like we never would have anticipated a company like GA sort of having interest in a small scaling startup. Now, even larger at the time that you guys approached us.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that. I want to discuss
Okay.
that. But let's first talk about GA's investment thesis.
Okay.
Sort of dovetails a little bit into that prior statement, which is there's sort of a long-term strategy. You guys typically or prototypically would come in late and build these much larger things. Let's first talk about just generally GA's investment thesis.
Okay, let me just give a quick overview of what GA is.
Yes, please.
Okay? It's a 39-year-old private equity group. We're growth-oriented. We're almost always minority investors. We invest nowadays about $4.5 billion a year. That's grown quite a bit over the past 5 to 10 years. Very global. And we will invest, on average, the average size investment, to your point, is about $150 million. For particularly high growth companies, we will go as low as $30 million. And so as we looked at JumpCloud, we were particularly excited about the growth prospects that were in front of you. Okay. And so it is a smaller investment that we've made in JumpCloud. We're very, very excited about what we saw before we invested, and we've only become that much more excited as we've come to know you better and better.
Good.
Let's step back to really the four things that we look at when we're investing, and we can talk about it in the context of JumpCloud as well.
Please, yeah.
Okay. So the four things typically we look at, now there are exceptions to this, is how big's the market? That's the first thing we look at, okay? The second thing we look at is how good is the management, okay? The third thing we look at is how good is the business model in terms of the kinds of things we talked about just a moment ago, in terms of, is the technology adding value? Is it differentiated, and will it stay differentiated? Okay, that's the third piece of it. And then the fourth of it is it at a value that can make sense for our investors?
Correct.
So when we look at JumpCloud, let's take them one at a time. We look at market size. Every company in the world needs a directory. Every company in the world. And those that don't yet have one are going to find out they need one. It is absolutely essential. The 5 things that JumpCloud provides is device management, user authentication, network authentication, the directory itself, and access to applications. And JumpCloud provides a full suite of that, but the market for that is just enormous. So let's take that as a given, okay? Interestingly, I think all large companies long ago realized they needed it. SMBs are increasingly realizing it, and so I don't think there's still a lot of SMBs with no solution.
We see it every day.
I know, and they're ripe and great opportunities for JumpCloud. So market size is enormous. That's number one. Management. Okay, you, Larry, and Raj were so impressive as we met you. You have great backgrounds, great successes. And you worked together, and it was like we just fell in love with you guys. And we said, this is terrific. Okay. Third is the technology, and as part of our diligence, we obviously looked at and talked to all the customers and talked to a lot of experts, and went deep on the technology as well. And what we found was that in every one of those 5 areas, you were at least as good as the competition. You were the only one that had all 5. And so that was really important, number one. Number two, there was a perfect mapping between the market you were going after and the technology you provided. Because the market you're going after is SMBs. Mm-hmm. SMBs don't have as much technical expertise. They can't afford as much technical expertise as large enterprises. And because they didn't have that, they really were looking for a self-service solution.
Exactly right.
And you have designed your product to be as self-service as it can be. In fact, one of the things that you track, which we love, is the percent of implementations that have been done self-service without any support from the outside. And I know you're working, part of your R&D effort is to increase that percent that is self-service, because that is a ridiculously good and compelling aspect of the solution.
We thank you for saying that, because it's like, of all the things, of the people that we've hired, the technology we've created, all of these things we're super proud of, but truly, I think the main thing, we never lost our North Star.
Right.
We never got pulled in the direction from the moment, Raj asked me to help him kind of launch a product. He had a vision for this for years, was we've got to do this, but maintain a dedicated focus to the small to medium enterprise who need this. Yes. They need the power of a corporate enterprise level directory, but we can't sell like that. Right. We have to be progressive.
So it's the way you go to market as well as the way you designed your product. And
That's
they're
exactly
totally synchronized, which is beautiful. It's beautiful to watch, actually.
We appreciate that. And it's been like, that is the discipline.
And
every day.
And you guys are ridiculously well disciplined at it. And I know there's a lot of pressure to move up market, move to big markets, but you have done a remarkable job of staying focused on the SMB.
Yeah, our work is still
and
yet
I should
to be done.
One last thing on that, which is, as part of our diligence, we talk to a lot of customers. They love your solution. They love your solution.
It still blows me away from nothing to a global organization. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. Let's move into, I want to kind of touch on the small to medium enterprise space just a bit. You now have seen patterns, clearly. We talked about that a few moments ago. What is it about, if I am building a business and I'm scaling it and I'm a, Series A, B, C, I'm a small to medium enterprise or scaling, I want you to put your CIO hat on, your technology hat on. What challenges am I facing in terms of like my growth? Like if you think of the biggest challenge that these scaling companies have, what do you think sits in front of them? What kind of sort of speed bumps?
So a small technology company that wants to be a big technology company, what are the biggest things? The biggest thing by far is what you mentioned before, is continually upgrading the talent for what you will be rather than for what you are.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys do a great job, but that is the biggest challenge we see. So when you're I'm making it up, a $20 million ARR company, but your aspiration is to be a $300 million ARR company, when do you start hiring ahead of that? You may have a bunch of people that are great for a $10 or $20 million company that won't scale. And knowing that, anticipating that, and hiring ahead of that is some of the biggest challenges that companies face. That's number one. Yeah, it's number one. Number two, particularly when you're selling to enterprises, which you're not, but particularly when you are, you need to build a field sales force. It's really hard. It's much harder than people think it is to build a field sales force. It's really hard to get a very good sales leader these days. You have to decide whether you want a sales leader who's going to spend all her time with customers or all his or her time building a sales team. And you got to decide what it is you need in that organization. A lot of it has to do with the characteristics of the rest of the senior team in terms of how much time they want to spend with customers, in terms of what you're looking for in terms of a sales leader. And then building all these field salespeople, it's a hit or miss in terms of hiring these people. There are some great solutions out there that make hiring salespeople, make that more of a science than an art, but it's still a hard thing to do. I'd say, again, hiring, and one of the things, for what it's worth, I've learned, is to build a great team. It really comes back to what I said about the head of sales before. It's not that you need to have a bunch of great individuals. Like an all-star team of baseball will not always beat the best baseball team or basketball or football. That you need to bring in people that will enhance the team rather than are particularly great at their individual function. I don't want to overblow it, but it's a really, really big deal. Mm-hmm. We've all seen a lot of examples where companies have brought in a great sales leader, or a great engineering leader, a great finance leader, but didn't work well with the rest of the team, didn't enhance the rest of the team.
Right.
And it becomes one of the single most important things for growing companies to do is to anticipate not just is this person great, but will this person enhance everyone else in their job inside the company.
This is absolutely the truth. And as you know, our board knows, we invest heavily in that sort of like the working relationships, the offsites, just so we can stay on track about what our common motivations are and what our personal motivations are.
Exactly right.
And
that's exactly right.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Let's do this. We're gonna go through some rapid fire stuff. Just stream of consciousness.
It's always dangerous.
We talked about your investment in JumpCloud. Mm-hmm. What do you see us as a company? Just very quickly, off the cuff. Like, where are we going?
So, I full directory service from user through to application. Staying extremely focused on SMB, on self-service for the next few years, continually enhancing the product, and potentially at some point, way down the road, expanding to focus on larger enterprises as well.
Good.
But not now.
Agreed.
But not now. It will. I will tell you this, having been part of a large company for a while, it's easy for large companies to overwhelm smaller companies. It's easy. And it's really important, the discipline that JumpCloud has to stay focused on small companies, build the capability, keep building it and building it and building it until they're ready to stand up to large companies.
The monster engine we're building is predicated on that whole life cycle, small to medium enterprise, like the fluidity of self-service, like all these things. We heard you loud and clear.
Right.
Recruiting.
Yes.
Why would someone want to join us?
Very high growth. I mean, this looks to be doubling every year. Great people. Who doesn't want to live in Boulder, Colorado?
This is true. Yes.
It's one of the great places on earth.
This is like as my wife says, there's plenty of opportunities around the earth to go and spend your, time building things, and we love it so much. It's why I keep telling her, this is why I keep building businesses in Boulder.
Right. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in Boulder?
Yeah.
And as just a great team. And you're solving a real pain point for customers. This is not a small deal. This is a really important thing. You don't have identity. You don't have a good directory in a company. You are exposed, incredibly exposed to security breaches.
Yeah,
incredibly exposed.
We see it, and we get these sort of reports back in from customers that will tell us exactly how we help them. Yeah. And new things that we've launched, System Insights, as you know, gives so much.
The telemetry is incredibly valuable to our customers.
Crazy data coming out of system endpoints, which is incredible.
Right.
Let's talk. If you were, assume that in the audience, you were talking to a senior person at some of our companies. Why would the CIO of GE, why did you find this so interesting? Again, putting your technological hat on.
Yeah. So I remember when we rolled out directory service at GE, and I remember it was hard. It was the big one, as you know.
For sure.
And it was actually controversial because it seemed like a lot of work, and what was the real value of it? And once it was rolled out, and we could do single sign-on, and we could track everybody in terms of helping everybody out in terms of access. It's a game changer. It was an absolute game. It made us more secure, and it made provisioning incredibly easy. It just streamlined the entire IT function at GE. It really did. It made a huge difference. And I have to imagine that it just changed the scale, but it's the same thing at every company on earth.
Yeah, good.
So the minute I heard about this, I remember it was a VC with Raj. That was about 4 or 5 months ago, and this makes complete sense. And I had not heard of an SMB solution for directory. And the minute I heard it, I said, yeah.
I mean, when we first were on the calls, I was in London speaking with you.
I remember that, yeah.
And it was such a visceral reaction from you in a positive way. You were, I remember the other partners were speaking, and you basically, I just ceased to talk because you were flowing. And it was awesome.
I got carried away, sorry.
No, but that was like, as me, Raj, Larry, like we vibrate, we're passionate people by our DNA, and when and if we have the opportunity to see that, it definitely, it's like Mercury joining, which we love to see. Again, in the spirit of rapid fire questions, assume a member of the press or an analyst whom we speak with often, but they're hearing our opinion. Why is the inevitability and of the modernization of directory services so critical right now?
What directory services do is make it easy to, frankly, provision. That is fundamentally what it does, and to track how people are accessing applications. There are so many ways companies can get in trouble today if you don't have the right access controls. And when you don't have a directory service, managing access controls becomes dramatically more difficult. And things that are difficult don't get done. Having a simple and externally managed provisioning capability changes everything. It just eliminates access control as a problem. And so I just see this as being perfect for that. There's one other piece that I find really valuable about this, which is I've always thought, and increasingly think, when you get into a zero trust environment that everyone's getting into, and in many ways, the two most important things in your environment become knowing what to encrypt, what not to encrypt, and importantly, knowing what to multi-factor authenticate and what not to multi-factor authenticate, because it's a hassle.
It is, yeah.
And you make it easy. You make it easy to do multi-factor authentication, and that's a home run for so many organizations that don't want to have to hassle employees with that. You don't have to carry around a token anymore. It's your phone. It's simple.
Keychain. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
right.
Things have radically
much
evolved.
better.
Final question.
Yeah.
There's a ton of boats sailing in the sea of identity and access management, meaning there's plenty of choice.
Yeah.
Putting, again, in the spirit of putting your CIO or the person who sat in that chair, why take a chance on us? Why buy us?
I'm going to go easy on this one. If I'm an SMB, self-service. I got a lot of things I'm trying to get done.
Yeah.
I don't have the expertise, typically, nor the resources. And you offer me something that is full from start to finish, and I can do it easily. No one else can do that. And it's a great solution at the same time. Self-service, and it's a great, broad, comprehensive solution. Who could beat that? I certainly know that we did our diligence. Nobody could. Not close.
Well, my friend, we're at the end.
Okay.
I won't cry. I want to thank you very much. We know your time is super valuable, and we appreciate it.
Delighted to do it.
And great to meet up here in the Palo Alto offices of GA.
Welcome. You're always welcome.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Gary.